I think the introduction of the bridge resource management has been the pinnacle or the biggest changes. Before it was that autocratic way of managing vessels. But we have to realize that young people who go to sea today, they are eager to learn and they want a coach and a mentor, not an autocratic boss.
Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where I meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast listeners, and welcome to the 171st episode of the Shipping Podcast. If you are here for the first time and want to ensure that you do not miss out on anything, follow the Shipping Podcast on your podcast platform of choice and become part of the tribe that gets to listen to new episodes as soon as they are released. In this episode, you will be listening to Hans Hederström, who to most people in the maritime industry is known as Mr. Simulator. Hans is a fellow Swedish citizen and from my hometown Gothenburg, but is also part of our history in the maritime industry. So it's a real treat to listen to Hans and his ongoing work to make our industry a safe space. I especially enjoyed when he told the anecdote about how the Center for Simulator Maritime Training, the CSMART in Almere, in the Netherlands came about. I hope you also will enjoy that part. So, without further ado, this is Hans Hederström for you. Welcome to the Shipping Podcast. Could you please introduce yourself?
I'm Hans Hederström, basically a retired mariner, but I still work a little bit as a consultant.
So you've been all your life in the maritime industry. How did it all start? Why did you become a mariner?
I had many different thoughts, and I looked into economics and law and other things, but it didn't happen. I wasn't accepted to the high school class that I wanted to come to, so I thought, okay, I'll wait a year and I'll become a cadet at sea. But I liked it and continued. And in 1974, I had my master's examination, and in 77, my master's ticket, so I could sail in any position.
So where did you start sailing?
I started sailing at the Broström company as a cadet, and first year just sailing on different ships, but the second year I joined their school ship, Stureholm, which was really the reason that I continued, because then I learned a lot, and learning is really what you want as a young person. After Broström's, I spent 3 years there, and then I started the Maritime Academy with the 1.5 year break in the middle, sailing and studying mathematics and physics. I continued and finished the Maritime Academy in 1974 and started to sail at Broström's again. And I quickly, after only 1 year, I became a chief officer of a tanker. And I liked it. It was big challenges. I went from small tanker to a mid-size, and in January 77, I was on the biggest they had, 278,000 tons. Yeah, what wasn't the biggest tanker at Broström's, but it was the biggest combined ore and oil carrier at that time. And that was a big challenge to manage and keep that position as a chief officer.
So how many people were in the crew at that time?
I think we were around 30. Not sure, but quite a lot.
And after that, did you go ashore or did you change?
Yes, when I came ashore after this 6 months at the Svealand, which is what's called, the company said, well, we are in a downturn in shipping, and we see that you would only have one more turn as a chief officer, then we might have to put you back as second officer because we are selling ships. And that gave me a reason to look at other directions. And fortunately, I found a job as a harbor pilot in Gothenburg and started there by the end of year 1977. However, I did go back because I wasn't sure about my pilotage career. So I went back and sailed as master a few times. One time on the Tor line to Finlandia, and another time at an old Stena vessel in the Caribbean. But I found pilotage more and more interesting as I also learned a lot more there. And I think the pinnacle moment for learning there was when I met a captain at Silja Line, Captain Hederström, in 1983. And when I presented myself as a pilot, he said, very harshly, he said, well, a pilot without a passage plan, that's not a pilot. Oh. So I followed him back and forth to Turku in this very demanding archipelago, and his bridge team and his planning and everything was fantastic. It was top of the range. Well, I've never seen such good navigation. So when I came back to Gothenburg, I immediately constructed my own passage plan and started to pilot, shown my passage plan before I piloted any vessel. And we were two pilots doing that. A friend of mine, pilot Sven Gyldén, and I, we did the same thing. We had taken Captain Lario's advice. You have to have a passage plan. How else can the bridge team monitor and support you? It's impossible. However, this was not popular with all my colleagues at the pilot station. So after some time, we found derogatory poems put on the wall in the pilot station. People didn't like change, and people still don't like change, And what we did required change, and it required brain work. And some people would prefer to continue as they've always done. That's, of course, easier.
Yeah, but it also provides some bravery. You need to be brave to lead the change.
Yes, it was hard to stick your neck out like that, but as we were two, it was easier. And with visiting Captain Lario from time to time, we realized, yes, we were on the right track. A passage plan is necessary. However, it was not every captain who realized the benefits of this. I remember one time that one captain who I presented my plan for, he said, "Pilot, don't you know the track or the route into Gothenburg?" "Captain, this is not for me, it's for you. It's for you to check that I'm doing the right thing." "Oh, I don't need that," he said. "I don't need that." So it was hard in the beginning, but I learned that you have to try to engage the bridge team. So I also presented it for the passage plan for the officer on the watch and said that you should try to follow the ship and use this plan because here it is. And before every turn, I asked the officer, "What's the next course?" And there was some hassle before they found out, but it worked, and they realized that it was good to be on the toes when the pilot was on board. And this was in the 80s, and I also ended up giving training courses to pilots in radar navigation and controlled turns, ship handling, together with two pilot friends, Benny Peterson in Stockholm and Sven Gyldén. That went on for several years in the 80s. And like we know, it's the instructor who learns most. So I think I understood pilotage pretty well just because I became an instructor. It was a very good time. And I also visited those manned model stations in France, Port Revel and Iwawa in Poland, giving me even more insight into the art of piloting.
But you're more famous to me for being the man in charge of the simulators. I don't know, how did that happen?
Yeah, we used simulators already in the 80s, but it was actually when I met Erik Warren at SAS Flight Academy. I was invited up there to look at the training in the aviation industry. And they had developed a new course called Flight Deck Resource Management. Some aviation companies call it Crew Resource Management. And Erik said that, well, I have a project to introduce this to the maritime industry. But I've only managed to get 6 organizations sponsoring it, and I need another one to cover the budget we have planned. And I looked at the course, and I was very impressed. I think this is really what we need, because it really was my thinking in many ways. So I thought, well, maybe I can make the Swedish club underwriters interested. I went up to Hans Hederström and Lars Lindfeldt and presented this. And they immediately became interested, and they joined this group of now 7 maritime organizations to sponsor the development of the now called Bridge Resource Management Program. And we started 1991 and finished 1993 with the course. And I was very happy to have also Captain Kari Larjo in that group, who was so knowledgeable.
But I found it interesting that someone in the aviation got the task of teaching people in the maritime. Who gave him that task?
Well, the thing was that Erik Warren, who was the manager of flight school, well, part of the flight school there, he was also a officer in the Swedish Navy. So he had a nautical background and realized that this would fit in very well to the maritime industry. And it really does. We have now conducted this course for many, many years, and the Swedish club is still doing it. So it was a big success in that sense. However, we now know that it requires more than just a course to change things, And as I have been working in this segment for many years now with training and so on, I realized that giving just a training course is not enough. You need to follow up. And that has been my thesis ever since the late 90s when we introduced the course in Australia. I had the pleasure to introduce it in Australia because I knew from previously I visited Australia in the late 80s and met the Captain Ravi Nedjer, who became very interested in what we were doing. And he invited me to introduce bridge resource management in Australia in the mid-90s. And I particularly remember the first course we did in Melbourne. We had a full course of 12 people. There were masters, there were pilots, there were officers, and there was even a retired CEO of a shipping company. And the first day of the course, it was lively discussions and went very well. But after the course and the most people had left, one of the very experienced masters came up to me and said, Mr. Hederström, this course looks like one of those woolly bully courses where you're supposed to be friends with everybody. I don't like that. Okay. Sorry to hear, I said, and I hope you find it better tomorrow. But at the same time, I was a bit apprehensive because the day after we were going to talk about management styles and leadership. And the day came and we had a lively discussion about leadership and management styles. But this very experienced captain, he didn't say anything. Well, what he had also told me the day before was that the company the year before had sent him to a people skills course. Okay, I understood. And why he didn't like this kind of courses. But anyway, when we were discussing this the next day, the captain didn't say anything. Even when I prompted him, he didn't say a word. But the discussion was going on very well. And I was just about to finish the module because we had run over time when this experienced master said, well, can I ask a question? He said. Oh, yes, of course. Well, not to you, he said, but I want to ask the CEO over there. And he said, what do you do with those autocratic captains? You sack them, or what do you do? And this retired CEO, he was a bit shocked, but he said, no, we don't sack them. We send them to people skills courses. Well, that was it for that day. But when we finished the course the next day, I found that everybody was happy, and this very experienced master, he came up to me again afterwards and said, Captain Hederström, would you like to come on my ship and visit my bridge team? He said. I would very much like to, I said, but unfortunately, we are moving on to Sydney now to do the course there, but maybe some other time. And I heard from friends that it had made some impact on this old master, but it was a very interesting situation at the course. And of course, there's been many others similar, but this is the first real situation I noticed that someone realized that maybe I had to look myself in the mirror.
Yeah, but it was big of him to admit that in a way to you.
Yes, it was.
So I know that you also went to Malaysia to Star Cruises and work with their simulator.
Yes, it happened that I had some officers and captains on the course in Sweden, and they promoted me to come to Malaysia because they knew I had some experience in the BRM work. So I went there in the year 2000 to start working at Star Cruises Ship Simulator with training, first of all, the Star Cruises bridge team in bridge resource management. But there were several big slots available. So I managed to get pilots from all over Southeast Asia, shipping companies in Malaysia and Singapore, like Maersk Singapore. And we also had Australian pilots coming up doing their work there, training there. I spent 4 fantastic years there. I must say that the training, you could see that the training really had made the Star Cruise bridge teams very good. Now, I never forget when I visited the Superstar Leo Christmas 2000 it was, with Captain Magnus Gottberg. I came on board and went up to the captain, and he said, well, you come just in time for me to take a walk around the ship. So follow me and I'll show you around the ship. And he was dressed in very nice white uniform. I was in my normal clothes. But he first took me to the garbage room. And we went down there. And when he told me garbage room, well, I thought, this... But we came down there and I noticed that it was pretty clean. And Magnus Gottberg introduced me to the person managing this garbage room. And the captain said, Hans, notice how clean and nice this looks like. And this is because of the hard work that this young man is doing. And I could see a big smile forming on this guy. And this is leadership.
Yes. I also had the pleasure of visiting the Superstar Leo when she was delivered, and it was what an experience. I have many fond memories from my trips to Malaysia and Kuala Lumpur at that stage. But then you came back to Sweden after Malaysia, or?
Yeah, I came back to Sweden because the prefect of Chalmers University, the maritime side at Chalmers Lindholmen, Olle Rutgersson, he asked me whether I would like to come back to Sweden and manage a project to install a full mission simulator at the Chalmers University. And of course, that was a very interesting thing. So I decided to come back, even if I liked it very much in Malaysia. But I came back and managed the specification of the simulator. That was in 2005. And in the spring 2006, we had a new simulator, very nice new simulator. I also employed one of my colleagues from Star Cruises, or he was a staff captain there, Staffan Persson, who I knew was very good instructor. And so we started to work there together. And we also had Nils Borre, who was an old employee of Chalmers. We three worked very well together. And one day in spring 2007, Hans Hederström of Marine Profile calls me and said, well, I have a potential customer for you here. He's visiting us today. And would you mind if we come up and visit you tomorrow? He said, of course, you're most welcome. So the day after, Hans came with Captain David Christie from P&O Princess Cruises. We showed him around the simulator, and we explained our way of teaching, our way of organizing the bridge work and so on. And he looked a bit skeptical, but anyway, he said, would you mind doing an operational review on a couple of our ships? Of course, we would love to, we said. So in the summer 2007, Staffan Persson and myself, we went on board 2 ships a week each. First the Star Princess and then the Oriana. And we saw very good traditional bridge work. And we wrote a report on this. And in September, 7th of September 2007, we presented this to a team, management team from P&O Princess. We kept on for almost 2 hours telling our observations. We could see on the faces that they were maybe not happy what we reported, but we suggested several changes: new bridge organization, a new way of passage planning, bridge resource management, and training in simulators, and then a follow-up on board. And the team discussed in private for a little while, and then they said to us, Hans, this is too much. We can't do that. That's a too big change. We can't manage that. It's impossible. And of course, we were a bit sad for that. But the only thing I can do then, I said, is that you take a trip to Singapore and Kuala Lumpur and have a look at the operation at Star Cruises, because that's what they are doing. What we have described to you is what they are doing. And 3 out of those people who came here, they went there, and particularly Captain David Christie was the leader of the group. He was a senior vice president at P&O Princess at that time. And they went down and they looked at the simulator in Port Klang, and they took a cruise with Captain Magnus Gottberg between Port Klang and Singapore. A few days later, they reported back to me, and Captain Christie said, Hans, this is the best operation I've ever seen. We must have this yesterday. So that was the that was the start of my work with P&O Princess and later Carnival Corporation.
So you built a center in Holland, I understand, in the Netherlands.
Yes, that was the final stages, but we first started training at Chalmers University. For 8 months we trained there, but the capacity was not enough, and the flight connections from all over the world were difficult to Gothenburg. So what we decided was that we need to have a simulator in Central Europe with a big airport. And that's why we moved to Almere, just outside Amsterdam. And we rented a big warehouse and installed 2 full mission bridge simulators. And we had 2 big classrooms. And we also later on installed 2 full mission engine simulators and started to train the P&O Princess people there in summer 2009. And we were Staffan Persson, Nils Borre, and myself from Chalmers. And we had one staff captain from P&O Princess, Gabriele Petrocelli. I had a secretary, Sally Petriana, and we had a lady in the kitchen, Daniele. That's the 6 people who started up there. And I didn't realize that 10 years later we would be 100.
Oh my God, 100 people.
Employed. And then we also had consultants. But the development of this training and the whole thing, we started slowly and we tried to introduce other companies. We also trained the Norwegian Cruise Line there for a while. And the big change when the accident with the Costa Concordia occurred. And Staffan was heavily involved in the accident investigation, the internal one. And we also made a video of the whole accident. And we showed that at the IMO to a completely silent audience. And after that, the top management in Carnival Corporation decided that our bridge management and procedures should be introduced on the whole Carnival fleet, almost 100 ships. So we worked on modifying the bridge procedures and detailed the whole thing and started to train people from all Carnival operating lines, 9 of them. Before there had been resistance, but now this resistance was gone after the accident. And we had not much problem to introduce the new bridge team, but we demanded that every course should be followed up by onboard coaching and mentoring. So we trained 10 captains and 10 chief engineers to instructor level and sent them on board for 3 to 5 days to help the captains and chief engineers to introduce this new system. And it took about 5 years, and it was all in place. And we were very happy. But at the same time, we realized the capacity of this training facility we had built in 2008 and 2009 was not big enough. So one day, Captain David Christie and another senior vice president, Jerry Montgomery, came to Holland to look at how we can expand. This was in 2013. We looked at different sites. I could see on both David and Jerry that they didn't like what they saw. So after a while, Jerry came up to me and said, "Hans, is this really what you want?" "No," I said, I would like to build a brand new facility with the latest equipment, top quality, everything, and full-size bridges and engine control rooms." And he looked at me and said, "Hans, why don't you do that?"
How many times in your life does that happen? That you meet someone that could actually make your dreams come through? Where did you build it?
Well, we built it in Almere, also in the same city that we had been before, but 5 kilometers away from the old site. We also built a 178-room hotel to host all the participants. And in July 2016, this new facility was ready for inauguration. And the whole top management from Carnival was there, the mayor and many officials from all over the place. And we had a fantastic inauguration. The whole center is called Hederström Maritime Center, after the main owner of Carnival, Mickey Hederström. And the CSMART Center, we had an 11,000 square meter big building where 4 big full mission bridge simulators were installed, and 4 big engine control rooms, and with engine rooms, virtual engine rooms were installed. And we started training in August 2016. And when I finished 2018, we had 7,000 participants yearly. And we had also reached or got a award from both Safety for Sea for our training, and we've also awarded by DNVGL the Center for Safety Excellence, because we had quality assured everything we did. And I felt I could leave this now 69 years old and leave it to a very competent admiral from the Canadian Navy, Bill Truelove, who is still managing the CSMART Center. Unfortunately, the center has been inactive now since the pandemic, but they have been conducting virtual courses ever since, and still is. But I think they will maybe get active again next year.
So how has digitalization had an impact on your work? I understand that you are a little bit interested in that nowadays.
Digitalization is the next thing, I think, in the shipping. There are several things. I think we will have digital checklists soon. I think that we can modernize pilot bridge team interaction or information exchange by digitalization of the pilot passage plans, which can be transferred in advance before the pilot boards. And the ship can send their pilot card or whatever. So when the pilot boards, the only thing that needs to be discussed is really the dynamic objects like traffic situation and weather and any changes to the passage plan or whatever, which has not been transferred. So I think that is the next step. And we have now applied to the Trafikverket in Sweden for funding to do a research on this, to see whether this can be implemented. I think the next step to have a more effective cooperation between the pilot and the bridge team, because what we've seen many times is that when the pilot comes on board and there is no common mutual agreed passage plan, the bridge team tend to become passive bystanders and not supporting the pilot that they should do. So that's my feeling, that we can do a bit of work there.
What is your opinion about autonomous shipping?
Well, I believe it is coming, and I'm not sure I have a clear opinion yet, but the fully unmanned vessels will probably take a bit of time, but I'm sure that there will be those autonomous vessels with some crew on board very soon, but maybe not. They will not be active on the bridge or in the room all the time. But the unmanned vessels, it will take some time, I think.
I totally agree with you, but it will have an impact on how your simulators would look like, or I mean, if you're putting together a remote control simulator, I don't know.
Yeah, of course you have to.
And also, I think education for seafarers.
Education will have to to be updated to fit into this new, so that there is a lot of development going on. And the funny thing is that the education is always behind the development. The development is done in the industry, and education has to catch up all the time.
Like regulators, or?
Yes, same with the regulators. Yes. So it's an interesting time we have ahead of us, but I'm sure it's going to come into autonomous shipping more sooner or later, and also with this wind-powered vessels in order to save our climate. So lots of things going on.
So what are the biggest changes that you have seen so far in your career?
I think the introduction of the bridge resource management has been the pinnacle or the biggest changes. Before, it was that autocratic way of managing vessels. But we have to realize that young people who go to sea today, they are eager to learn, and they want a coach and a mentor, not an autocratic boss. Then they will go ashore again, and you will have difficulties to fill the positions.
Do they know what they are getting themselves into when they enter the career of being a seafarer?
Not as much as I did when I started my career and decided to go to school and learn. So there are advantages and disadvantages with the system we have. But I think a school ship is probably the best way of introducing young people to the career, but obviously too expensive. But they definitely need good mentors and coaches in the beginning. And I have myself written a piece for the Nautical Institute now on instructional coaching, how captains or senior officers can coach younger officers and help them to advance in their career. I think that there is opportunities for learning if we just know how to do it.
But you also know a lot about leadership. So what is your view on leadership?
I think we need to realize that leadership today is different from yesterday. In the past, captains were promoted based on their technical competence, but that's not enough anymore. We need to have a balance between technical and human skills if we want to have people staying at sea and also to form an effective bridge team or engine control room team. You need to have leaders who can engage and motivate people to do their very best. And captains and chief engineers, they must know how to coach and mentor their people. And they should try to bring them up to their own level or even above their own level if they can, just like Captain Kari Larju did. So there is a lot of things to be done on that side. Leadership is still needed, but it's not just on the ships. It's also on the shipping offices.
Yeah, but we rarely discuss leadership in our industry. We tend to discuss more technical things. Still, we still do that.
It's technical and it's money.
But I think it's changing.
People is important, very important. And I think we need to focus more on how to create and engaged and motivated teams on board our ships. Some shipping companies are very successful in that. We can see that here in Sweden with some companies. They are very good at that. But we can also see others who are not so successful in this, and they have to change their crew frequently, and crew are not comfortable on board. They are working in a constant fear with self-deception, and they don't dare to speak up due to fear. And this is not good.
No, and I think we have a homework to do, the industry, because we need to show and to share with the young people what it means to become a master or master mariner or a chief officer or just to be working at sea. Because it's not like in the old days you went on board and then you came out 30 years later. Young
That's
people
right.
have a different expectation, and I think that we are not good enough telling them that there are different ways that you can become different occupations within the industry.
Yeah.
You don't have to become a master mariner and always sail as a master mariner. You can do other things like you have done. I mean, you have developed part of the industry which is very important. But you couldn't have done that unless you have been on board a ship before.
No, I think the future will open more possibilities for maritime profession. So you don't have to stay 50 years at sea if you don't want to. There are opportunities, and I think today it's a good choice to start a career at sea. There will be many jobs in the future, not only on ships, but also on shore.
How do you see the future for the maritime industry? What do you see there on the horizon?
I hope that the maritime industry will be taken more seriously by people ashore, particularly those who are not in the maritime industry, and see that we really depend heavily on the maritime industry. And I hope also that safety, proactive safety, will come to all segments of the maritime industry. Today, you can see the tanker industry is pretty good. The cruise industry is very good. There are some other segments who could do better. But I hope they will be able to spend money on training and development.
But to make people in the general public understand how important we are, that's our job, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely.
So how can we do that?
This podcast maybe, and some more programs on TV and so on, showing the importance of the shipping industry. I'm sure that could help.
Yeah, I think the pandemic has also showed the importance of both the maritime industry, but also for seafarers.
Yes.
But it's the momentum now that we need to sort of cash in on.
Yeah, we need to catch that.
So who would you be interested in listening to in the shipping podcast? Do you have any suggestions for me who I should interview?
Well, I think the CEO she's now the president at Princess Jan Swartz in Los Angeles would be very interesting. But also Captain Antonio Di Lieto, or why not my old friend Ravi Nidja from Melbourne. They have a lot of things to say. So, but there are many more. So I'm sure you will find enough participants. Otherwise, you have to come back to me.
I will. I certainly will. Thank you very much, Hans, for taking the time to talk to me. And I really enjoyed the sort of listening to the history behind how it all came about. I only knew you from a distance before, but I think I know you more now. Thank you, Hans. You have so many stories to tell. I truly enjoyed our conversation. Some thoughts that came to mind is that it's hard work to be a trailblazer like you are. An innovator, a person who is the first to do something. And I can say I know a little bit about that as well. In my view, you have not got the recognition enough for all the work that you have done for the maritime industry. It's not too late yet. Maybe this episode can spur a few thoughts on how that can be done. I have recorded 5 more interviews the last few weeks, so episodes almost until Christmas is lined up. It's a mix of topics coming, but all with exciting guests. As always, it's the people who have a story to tell that keeps me and the Shipping Podcast going. So, until the next time, from me to you, over and out. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast, don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a shipping podcast available and that they should download it and listen to the maritime professionals who are sharing their passion for the shipping industry.